Hello, I'm Mike Fotanopoulos, academic coach for Springdale Public Schools, and I just wanted to chat with you about what how we do a HIPP drill, and I'm going to use this year's AP World History DBQ. I'm a table leader and a reader for AP World History, and so this is the one that we got, and I'll share it with you, and I'll do document 1 for you today, and of course you can see the other videos for documents 2, 3, and 4. I'll try to keep these videos down underneath 10 minutes so that they're not just wearing you out. And hopefully you'll learn something. So when we HIPP a drill or when we HIPP a document, what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand the historical situation or intended audience or purpose of the doc or the point of view, tone, perspective, all of these types of things. Basically get those points in our analysis and reasoning section of the rubric. So this will help us really discern what's going on with the DBQ and what's going on with these documents, and hopefully you'll learn something. Let's move forward. Here's what the HIPP drill looks like when you come into my classroom. Name, prompt, your answer to the prompt. I think to do this any other way would it really hurts you. You've got to be able to have a prompt with any HIPP drill that you do. And so if I'm a teacher, I'm going to do that. And if I'm a student, I'm going to ask, what's the prompt to this document? Documents don't sit out there in the world by themselves. There's a reason why they're there. There's a reason why these people spoke and said and did and things of that nature. So understand that. And again, it'll get you out of the habit of just history dropping and moving on. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we'll talk about this prompt and the answer to it. And then, of course, down here is where I fill out my H and my I and my P and my P. And again, you're going to find out here in a second that there's a ton of stuff going on in history, historical situation, a little bit of stuff for intended audience, a little bit of stuff for purpose, a little bit more than intent. And in this one, there's just hard. There's nothing there. And you're going to have to manufacture it if you really want to get into it. Maybe you can do a little bit of tone, but as we read this document, as we read the DBQ this summer at the reading, the document 1 just did not lend itself very much to a lot of POV. So again, as a student, I certainly wouldn't spend a lot of my time doing that. And so I would get into the habit, teachers and students, that this is, understand what is and what is there and what's not there, and to, try not to, force a square peg in a round hole. Make sure you have a prompt to go with your doc. Do not do the HIPP drill without it. And again, I've already talked about this for a little bit, and you'll see what I mean here in a little bit by that. That history dropping, you want to get out of that. And again, you don't want to get into the forcing of a HIPP everywhere and try to do all 4 of these all the time. Very, very, very difficult. The most consistent one that I see that's easy-ish to do is the H. Most of us can kind of understand what's going on historically and relate that back to the prompt as to why this person or this phenomenon is happening, occurring, etc. So let's HIPP a document, and before we do that, we've got to understand what the question is. And I've already done this with the thesis statement little tutorial video I created, but I'll do it again real quick here. Evaluate the extent means immediately my brain is starting to think of some sort of us versus them, apples versus oranges, trucks versus cars, boys versus girls, something. I'm comparing something. And here I'm comparing extent. And so to a large extent, non-Western elites, what were their approaches to modernizing their society, and how that differed during the Industrial Revolution, which is what that is. So again, you're going to have some that really want to modernize, and versus bad. They want to do it, smiley face, if I can get it, versus don't want to do it. Don't want to be modern, don't want to look like the West. So again, that's what my brain is thinking as I'm starting to look at these documents. So I'm going to, again, I don't want to read a bunch of documents and have these documents be all over the place. These documents are probably going to start to kind of rhyme with one another pretty quickly. So let's get into that and see what happens. Document 1, and this is the one we're going to do today. Sultan Abdulmajid, he is the ruler of the Ottoman Empire. He's the non-Western elite. and he creates a decree in 1839 that the Tanzimat reforms are underway. Now, right here, if you know what the Tanzimat reforms are, and you can remember that, and you're a pretty bright kid, and you know, things kind of come easy to you in regards to history, you've got your answer. Bam. This guy likes the idea of modernizing, and he modernized so much that he creates the Tanzimat reform, and you know what that is? That is, he looks like the West because he's just written a constitution, so to speak, a constitution that looks like the West from the Enlightenment. That's Enlightenment. Sorry. Okay, but if you don't remember that, and if you can't remember Tanzimat, now you've got to read this document and be reminded of that. Maybe some of us never heard of Tanzimat reform, so now you're working off of kind of a blank slate while other students are working off of, oh yeah, and you're remembering as you're reading, and others already know it. So again, there's varying degrees of kids that might know this thing. That really, it just kind of speeds up whether or not you are going to be able to, you know, do this a little bit quicker. But sure enough, 150 years, we used to be strong, and now we're weak. So let's do some things that make us strong, like every defendant shall be entitled to a public hearing. Sounds like a jury by our peers. That's from the West. Everyone shall have the right to own property. That sounds like something from the West, that pursuit of happiness and all that business. Buy and sell freely, kind of a free economy or an open economy, getting into capitalism a little bit, which again was starting to kind of be the thing in the West. And again, security for religious groups, that is to say, here comes freedom of religion. And we're probably even starting to think of the ideas in the Ottoman Empire, which is highly unlikely at that time, or you wouldn't think that it would happen as a Muslim society that it was, ensconced in its Muslimness, if I can say that. And here they're trying to say, no, all religious groups. And so that's freedom of religion, that's separating church and state. And so again, that's acting like the West. So there's your answer. Now that you've answered the prompt, now you can start to get into the historical situation. Why is that his answer? Well, let's get into that. Remember that the Ottoman Empire was the sick man of Europe. Remember, the sick man of Europe was this old patient that was dying because the Greeks started to break away in the 1820s. Egypt, all the way from 1800, from Napoleon and his first invasion, until 1867, when Muhammad Ali comes in and helps to create that kind of a satellite to the Ottomans. Maybe you don't remember all that, but maybe you remember the sick man of Europe. Well, you can't just name drop the sick man of Europe, and that's what some kids would do. They would just name drop and move on. But you got to tell why the sick man of Europe is a reason why this man would have an approach the way he had it. Well, he's again, Western powers acted as the doctors administering the goods to the Ottoman world. They're giving them technology, weapons, etc. And again, that's to keep the Russians out of the warm seaport that is the Mediterranean. And this is the Europeans going against the Russians, and they're using the Ottomans to do it. And this is called the game. There were students that actually mentioned this in their essays, and they were really good if they explained what the game was and how that would influence the Sultan's attitude and his approach. And again, that's what you're trying to do is again explain why his approach is the way it is. And you're not just name dropping some historical factoid, but you're actually becoming somebody who understands how history works and using that phenomenon. Another good one that you could have said was geography. I think that's a good point. Geography plays a big role because look where the Ottoman Empire is founded, and it lasted until World War I. It's 500 years. They were very accustomed to negotiating and being with the Europeans because they're right next to the Europeans, right? As opposed to the Chinese, as opposed to the Japanese, who are a moon away. These guys are easy to kind of grab onto new ideas and they can see maybe a little bit of a power shift. The old Neanderthal European is now fully blossomed into whatever, if you want to get into that. But you've got a power shift, and it's because of the Industrial Revolution. And so what do they have that we need? Well, they've got machinery, they've got guns, they've got weapons, they've got steel and iron and steam engines and all this kind of stuff. And so, again, And again, enlightened ideas, maybe we need that too. So anyway, they would get this, the Ottoman Empire would get this a lot quicker than, say, maybe the Chinese would get it, who are, you know, so many moons away. So there you go. Intended audience is kind of difficult for this one. And again, I say out loud, maybe it's a really good idea to start working on who is the real intended audience. And if you do that, maybe you can get to an intended audience a little bit quicker. Maybe it's for the businessmen to live in Istanbul permanently. Don't go anywhere. Let's make things safe for you guys. So maybe that will help bolster and enrich our society. Maybe it's for all these disenfranchised people of different types of people. Maybe it's for all the Jews, the Christians, the non-Christians, the Muslims. And then again, we got varying Muslims. We got Shiites and Sunnis. Not many Shiites, but they're in our world. And so again, to quell and to stop any future rebellions, let's make these folks a little bit happier. Maybe that's the real intended audience. So instead of saying the intended audience is the people, maybe stop that and get into the real people. Who would it have been? And so you can also see here how intended audience and purpose start to really act similar. Let's go to so purpose, keeping riots down. Again, kids would have talked about this, and then keeping civil wars down. And this is where they would come back and start talking about how the Greeks broke away, or Serbia broke away, etc. And again, if I'm the West, I have all these enlightened ideals, and they seemingly are going all over the world, kind of taking over the world with their weaponry, and you know. So again, let's look European. Let's talk their language. Let's sound like them, and maybe that'll help us create better alliances with them. So again, if I do something like the Tanzimat reforms, which looks a lot like the Constitution, maybe that makes things a little bit easier for us to create alliances. So there you go, another purpose. And finally, point of view, not much here. Again, it's very difficult. There were some students who talked about tone, and that's about it, because he did have an authoritative voice, or a kind of speaking with authority, kind of like a new boss on the block kind of attitude. Maybe he was going after those young Turks. See, I can't talk about point of view or tone without talking about some sort of real intended audience, right? There you go, coming back to that. Maybe they felt insecure because they're sharing their once authentic Muslim heritage with so many incoming infidels now. And this guy, the Sultan, has to keep these young Turks at bay and happy. So there you go. Just a little bit of what's going on here with this document 1, and something that you can do in the future. And again, I would never do a DBQ HIPP drill without a prompt. I would get out of that business of just history dropping, and I would start to relate everything that I'm doing back to the prompt. And then that'll keep you from going down rabbit holes and chasing things that aren't there, and keep you writing real consistently good DBQs in the future. Hope this helps. Be looking forward to other videos. Talk to you soon. Bye.